Thank you. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for the invitation. I'm so stoked to be doing it. I'm going to start by sharing my screen and sharing a video. Let's see here. This is, oops, now this covers me. There we go. Where's the one I wanted? Right here. Okay, so this is just a little bit of an introduction to Prometheus in general. And I figured I'll give us a nice starting place.
Hold on, I'm going to mute everyone and then you will unmute yourself.
Oh, right. And then, oh, I'm unmuted. Great. Okay, here we go. It's going to skip just a little bit. That's okay.
Prometheus. Prometheus created humans and ignited the psyche. He counseled Zeus in his war against the Titans and created a black hole to imprison the fallen rulers. But once the Olympian monarch established his rule of order, Prometheus rebelled against this first decree, a flood that would kill all humans and wipe the slate clean for Zeus. By advising his progeny to fashion an ark, he saved the young race, until, at a feast, a rift was roused between gods and men. To resolve the issue and establish a bridge between disputing parties, he invented the burnt offering. Though this gesture became a ritual standard for attempting to trick Zeus into receiving unwanted waste as a generous gift, humans were deprived of fire. In an act of necessary rebellion, the progenitor stole back the fire in a hollow fennel stalk, with which he delivered knowledge beyond instinct. How to work clay, wood, metal, numbers, and words to make art, food, and tools. This defiance of Zeus brought punishment upon Prometheus and his people. To humans he gave Pandora, not a woman like Prometheus' wife or his ally Athena. Hesiod presents her as a misleading fiend, a plague on humanity, a contorting influence on the human psyche. Once married to Epimetheus, Prometheus' brother, she opened the jar, mistranslated centuries ago as a box, and introduced suffering to human life. By this time, the human benefactor had been exiled to a rock at the edge of the world, to the place of the sunrise, where, chained to a stone, furious at Zeus, he foresaw the tyrant's downfall. And, for refusing to reveal the prophecy, a ravaging eagle was loosed on his regenerative liver. Still, true to his foresight, Zeus' own son later freed him from bondage.
So, look, we got to get started by lighting a bunch of fires because Prometheus is like all fire. And, you know, it just seems like we got to light some fires and get them going. Prometheus is the titan of brilliance and fire and revolution and rebellion. So let me introduce you just a little bit to myself, burn a little bit of sage. Get going. So my name is Linn. I am a mythologist, Ph.D. Did my dissertation with some amazing people. I did it at Pacifica Graduate Institute. One of my readers was Maria Tatar at Harvard, and one of my chapters in my dissertation was on Prometheus. And I'm going to read just a tiny bit from it. Also, I've been working for the Joseph Campbell Foundation in a variety of ways for many, many years, including running, starting in Joseph Campbell Mythological Roundtable at the Ojai Foundation. But by now, I'm writing the study guide for the foundation on Hero with 1,000 Faces. And I want to encourage all of you who don't know about them to check out the Myth Blasts, the JCF Myth Blast. It's a great way to participate in the community. If you see yourself as somebody who's interested in mythology, mythology often exists in the space between. And if this is one of the great ways to exist in the space between, is check out those Myth Blasts. I also am a department chair at a film and performing arts college called Hussian College. And so what I do is I teach myth and story to storytellers for the purpose of empowering them and empowering their stories. And in 2020, I think we're all very aware that there's some very important stories to tell. So, I'm very excited to work with the new incoming students just 2 weeks from now to help them, to help give them superpowers and powerful tools to tell the stories that aren't being told and the stories that need to be told. I also run a group, a website called Mythosophia, and the whole purpose of that, that's all mythology channel, Mythosophia, Myth Salon, they're all kind of interconnected ecosystem, but what they're all about is supporting the trans-institutional community for mythologists. Again, I don't think any of us fit squarely in a single one of these communities. We exist in a wonderful way between them. And so, so Mythosophia really supports and helps point to all kinds of different stuff. And I hope we can continue to point to the events that you guys are doing here. Thank you to this New York Mythology group for having me in supporting that type of community building. Before I get started, I should also say, look, Prometheus is an energy, and when I start doing Prometheus and I start getting into Prometheus, it becomes very much an energy for me. So if I start talking extremely fast, extremely intensely, if I start holding nothing back, I don't see any children here, so I can probably swear as much as I think Prometheus would, and if that's okay, I will. Tell me not to, restrain me if you dare, just kidding. That's the whole Promethean motif. But Prometheus is unbound, unrefined, he's raw fire, And so, yeah, that's very important to me. Now, the other thing about setting up this presentation is I didn't want to do it as Hephaestus. Hephaestus is the protege of Prometheus. And Hephaestus is, if you think of Prometheus as that first inspired idea, pop, light bulb moment. Think of Hephaestus as the one who then turns it into a masterwork. So, the Hephaestian energy is going to craft the heck out of something. But Prometheus is raw, but infinitely potent. And I wanted to do my best to meet you guys in a less restrained and less Hephaestian way. So I've got some plans, but also, I expect some tangents. He's really fundamentally Prometheus. Think of him as like a volcano, and we'll talk about that some more. So there are 3 parts I want to get into. A few, but really I want to give you guys talk about the image of Prometheus, talk about what he's about a little bit. Then I want to go through his story. And then at the end, I really want to spend time asking y'all to help me reflect on how you see Prometheus in our culture today, how you see that energy, the character, the patterns that he represents in our world. I should also say that I have my relationship with Prometheus is multi-layered, everywhere from intense research and study to personal dreams. My passwords are versions of the word Prometheus, often visions, and I've even fallen into a trap of identifying a time with Prometheus, and you have to learn not to do that kind of thing, even with your very, very favorite characters. Now I want to share with you some images of Prometheus. Let's see here. All right. So here's an image of Prometheus by William Blake. And here you see him up on the mountaintop. And this is very important, and we're going to talk about that some more. Why is Prometheus on a mountaintop? But before we do, I want to share just a few more images here. Here's Prometheus being restrained. Prometheus represents the rising up of the oppressed. This is probably my favorite example of a Promethean moment, is when, or the letters from a Birmingham jail. When literally, I'm going to share this with you, the guy from this image, hold on, this guy right here that's chaining him down, the guy that chained this guy down, the city where this guy got chained down, I'm going to show you, is this guy. This guy defines the skyline of Birmingham, the city where Martin Luther King was chained down, where he was put in the jail. It's just too uncanny. There he is, the figure that towers over Birmingham is the figure, the place where Martin Luther King was bound is the figure that is binding Prometheus. Let me share just a couple more images. Here you see, on one hand, you can see Prometheus reaching up to steal fire from the gods, but on another, you see that he is limited. He's blocked. He can't go any higher. This is what Prometheus is about, is meeting up against that tyrannical oppression and doing something about it. So now let me tell you, just we'll come back to some of these cultural inflections and expressions, but I want to tell you a little bit about the image itself. So Prometheus is chained to the sunrise, chained to the top of a mountain. What the hell? What does the top of a mountain have to do with sunrise? Well, this is a place where even the Egyptians across the Mediterranean and across the Black Sea recognized Mount Elbrus as the place that the sun rose. Mount Elbrus is the tallest mountain in Europe. It's in the Caucasus Mountains. And so the sun would rise over the Caucasus and set on the other into the Atlantic. And that was the known world. And so Prometheus was chained to the sunrise, chained to the top of a mountain. Now in Eden, which we're familiar with, Eden is also the top of a mountain. And it's also the place of the sunrise. Why? Why would the top of a mountain be associated with the sunrise? We think of the sun as rising towards the top of a mountain at noon, you might think. That would be the way that we're mostly oriented now, is that the height of the sun is at noon. But in the ancient and older way of seeing things, the height of the sun was at sunrise, and it's falling all day. And that's why Eden, right? We see it with Eden. The fall begins at the beginning, at the place of the sunrise, at the mountaintop. And this represents an older image of the world, an image of the world as a mountain. And Prometheus fits into this world image, this relationship to the world as a mountain. And so we think about mountains as axis mundis in mythology, right? The axis mundi, the center of the world. And in this case, Prometheus is there at the center of the world, on the top of the world, at the place of the sunrise. And he is the place from which the light falls. He's very associated with Lucifer, in fact. So let's think about Prometheus at the sunrise volcano. So what I want us to think about when you think about Prometheus chained to the sunrise, think about the magma coming out of the volcano as the blood coming out of his own liver, which opens and closes and cycles. The volcano opens and closes and cycles just like his liver does. So I had a dream like this once where a Promethean man was suspended over a wound in the mountaintop, a fractal-like wound in the same shape and size. His protege, Hephaestus, is known as Vulcan to the Romans, which is where we get our word for volcano. And the mountain to which Prometheus was bound, mighty Elbrus, the tallest in Europe, is a volcano with two peaks that display this history. So think of Prometheus as atop the sunrise volcano. Every time he erupts, there's an entirely new world. And every time he does so, it's through a wound. And as we'll see, the wound is always the wound of tyranny. In England and Scotland, many split mountaintops, like that of Elbrus, are associated with Arthur. They're called Arthur's seat. And the association of the throne with the mountain peak is kind of obvious, right? And it is layered too. This is the power at the top, right? That has this omniscient view. This is the Tower Tarot card. This is the Eye of Sauron, the eyes at the top of the tower. And this is also the dragon at the top of the mountain, the dragon hoarding the gold inside the mountain, right? And we remember Tolkien in The Hobbit. In The Hobbit, we have the dragon that leaves the volcano and erupts, and then we have the wealth flow outward from the mountain. Similarly, in Lord of the Rings, it's a volcano that erupts at the end. And what you actually see structurally, the dragon and the volcano are in the same place, doing the same thing. And what's really happening is it's all about the hoarding of power. The capstone is the dragon is hoarding the gold within, is hoarding the power, is limiting the power, repressing the power. And what we can see in the shape of the mountain is a monopoly. Mono, 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 everything coming to a point. So the monopoly, the monarchy, the monotheism. Mono is one. And when the mountains of being come to a single point, and when that point freezes into a throne, the capstone of power will be removed. This is the work of Prometheus. From the wound of tyranny erupts his revolution. So, oops, I shouldn't be there in my pages yet. Okay. So what I now want to do is I want to show you, having introduced a little bit of this imagery, I'd like to read a little bit of an introduction, just a little bit from my dissertation where I got into this stuff. And so give me just 1 second here. I'm going to share my screen again. And here we are. Okay. So just one section here. I'm going to get to Prometheus, the freedom fighter. Sorry, there we go. Prometheus foresaw the beginning and the end of the Olympian reign. After helping Zeus to create the Olympian order from a titanic age, the monarch of the gods began to undermine human freedom. Starting with the flood and their right to live, fundamental to the depictions of both Hesiod and Aeschylus is the conception of Zeus as the oppressor of mankind, and Prometheus as mankind's benefactor. By defying Zeus in myth, Prometheus became a symbol for those in history who fought tyrants. Tyrants in Athens, Persia, France, England, Russia, and the Catholic Church. He became a symbol of protest against traditional religion and morality, against any limitations to human endeavor, against prejudice and abuses of political power. Candidly associated with the Nietzschean proclamation of God's death. So in Goethe's free verse poem, Prometheus, translated by Herbert Nerlich, the firebringer scaves the way of Zeus in the favor of human presence in creation. When Goethe's Prometheus insists, "My earth is mine," he speaks as a rebel and creator at once. The earth is his land and his clay, his space, his working material. As Carenier points out in Goethe's Mythologium, Prometheus' work of creation is indeed limited exclusively to what he can create on the earth. He fights for the human right to be, and from the progenitor's point of view, to be human is to be a creator, is to work on earth. So of course, even in peace, there is something inherently rebellious about creation and change. As will become increasingly clear, Prometheus represents the spirit in humans that seeks to change the world from how it is to how humans want it to be. His gifts to men rest upon the belief in progressive stages from savagery to civilization, a penetrating account of man's evolution that in many of its details is astoundingly modern. Forgive the pronoun. He is the ageless spirit of progress and the unending will to change. As we engage his rebellious nature, we will find that to be an outgrowth of his essence as a creative progenitor. The plot points in Prometheus myth are acts of both rebellion and creation. His defiance of the Titan rule creates the Olympian order. His salvation of humans from Zeus' flood protects his creators. His creation of the sacrificial bridge between gods and humans was in the form of a defiant trick. His gift of fire, the power of creation, was a direct act of defiance, and his rebellious refusal to reveal Zeus' downfall was for the sake of a new age's creation. All these creative and rebellious acts were on behalf of this ultimate creative rebellion from the status quo that was his creation of creators, us. It is for these creators that he serves as a benefactor, as a teacher, as a defender, and when circumstances require, as a freedom fighter. Like Goethe, Lord Byron looked to Prometheus as a symbol of heroic individualism, at odds with tyrannical powers, both human and divine. His Prometheus was written in the revolutionary spirit of the 19th century, and as Doherty points out, he was working in the footsteps of Aeschylus, celebrating Prometheus' tireless endurance of all the tyrannical forces that Zeus can dish out. Tarnas expands on Prometheus' historical presence in these revolutions that inspired such pre-romantics as Goethe, Byron, Mary, and Percy Shelley when he says, in the extraordinary era that brought forth the American and French revolutions, the Industrial Revolution, the beginning of Romanticism, and all these coinciding historical phenomena, the figure of Prometheus is of course readily evident as well. The championing of human freedom and individual self-determination, the challenge of traditional beliefs and customs, the fervent revolt against royalty and aristocracy, established religion, social privilege, and political oppression, the Declaration of Independence and the Declaration of the Rights of Man, liberté and égalité, the beginnings of feminism, the widespread interest in radical ideas, the rapidity of change, the embrace of novelty, the celebration of human progress, the many inventions and technological advances, the revolutions in art and literature, the exaltation of the free human imagination and creative will, the plethora of geniuses and cultural heroes. Here too were the romantic poets with their great pains to Prometheus himself. We find this Promethean drama played out time and again when tyranny needs to topple. And we find that both artists and philosophers have consistently recognized his presence, power, and importance, not only to the revolutions in which they see his efforts, but also to their own work. The romantic utopia described by Percy Shelley in his Prometheus Unbound is not wholly unlike the utopian dreams of Karl Marx. Percy wrote of a reality in which thrones were kingless and men walked, one with the other even as spirits do. None fawned, none trampled. Prometheus is the titan of egalitarianism. As Prometheus' potency was carried out from the Romantic period into the communist spirit, new rebellions were mounted against religious state and economic tyranny. A Marxist theorist said, Marx was certain that the proletariat as the collective Prometheus would, in the universal revolution, sweep away the age-long contradiction between the interest of the individual and that of the species. When such hope was put into practice against Russian czars, an English poet and magazine editor wrote a book, Prometheus and the Bolsheviks, a 1937 book on the Caucasus that invoked Prometheus as a powerful symbol of the Bolshevik cause, to deliver man from tyranny and barbarism by seizing power, by seizing material power. Lehman recounts a dream of Prometheus that he had while sleeping aboard a Soviet steamer crossing the Black Sea. In this dream, the Titan says to him, I find myself passionately on the side of the Bolsheviks when I hear accounts of the Civil War struggles. It reminds me of my own struggles with Job over the fire business. By recalling great rebellions in human history and recognizing the acknowledged projection of Prometheus into their situations, we get a sense of what he stood for and why, and when. Humans have continued to seek him out. Perhaps there's no better antithesis to the Promethean will than the statement of power in Prometheus Bound. He says, every job's a pain, except for the god at the top. Only Zeus is free. That's the situation of tyranny. Only the tyrant is free. To which Promethean will responds, no one dared stand up against this but me. I alone have the courage. I saved humanity from going down, smashed to bits, into the cave of death. Prometheus is that one who, when all else yields to the might of a tyrant, he refuses to kneel. And when no courage can be found in the hearts of the living, his spirit is loosened to waken the brave. He is the fearless leader, the wise advisor, he who will sacrifice for humanity's greater good, and he who takes responsibility for the establishment of freedom. Freedom not to be created anew, not a new, spontaneous, made-up idea of freedom, but the freedom that should be defended as natural and proper and right. It would seem there's no limit to the sacrifices Prometheus is willing to make for creative freedom. No suffering he cannot handle. No torture will break his integrity. This is the character he could not be if he was unwilling to make sacrifices. To be ostracized by Zeus, put in bonds, wedged into stone, disemboweled, and to continue his defiance in the face of further threat. So that's just a little bit of an introduction to Prometheus, what he's about, how he relates to freedom fighting. So from here, I'd like to tell you the story of Prometheus. And after I tell you the story, we'll open into a discussion. Is everybody doing okay? Is everyone with me so far? I hope so. Okay. And I stopped sharing screen. Good. All right. Let me make sure I start in the right place because I'm about to start this whole story. Good. Okay. All right. So Prometheus is the titan of brilliance and thought. He's a titan of creation and creativity. He's a titan of egalitarianism. He is a titan of change. And the story begins in the Golden Age, an age ruled by the Titans. And the Titans, where Prometheus is brilliant and thoughtful, the Titans are mindless instincts. Where Prometheus represents creation, the Titans are just as destructive as they are creative. Where he represents egalitarianism, the Titanic rule has become hierarchical. And where he represents change and personifies change, in the golden age, nothing changes. No one dies. There's no mortality, and change does not happen. So you can see that Prometheus is inconsistent. He's a Titan, but he's inconsistent with the Titanic age. And if you think about it psychologically, which is a big part of how we think about it at Pacifica, and the ways that I've been trained, is that he is a Titan of knowledge. So even though he's raw, his rawness happens to open into something new. His is a rawness of mind and freedom and building and change, which does not fit with the rest of Titanism itself. And so, meanwhile, however, some of you know this part of the story. So the Titan, Kronos, has been eating all of his children. This is how he is repressing change. No change, right? This seemed like tyranny, right? We're not letting the youth, we're not letting the little person, we're not letting them up. We're insisting on the power that is, insisting on the status quo. But then something happens. Rhea, Titaness, she's not having it anymore. She's really tired of Kronos eating all of her children. And so she tricks him by giving him a swaddling stone. This is a stone wrapped in a swaddling cloth. And if I can, I'm going to try and come back to what the hell that stone is about and try and make an argument that that stone is in fact a meteor from which iron is made. Because what I want us to realize is that this is about a transition into the Iron Age. So during the myth, this is the fall from the Golden Age. And the fall from the Golden Age is into the Iron Age, which is going to be Zeus's age. And so this is also a rise of iron. Iron was one of the greatest shifts in power. It's like the machine gun of the ancient world, cuts right through your bronze, right? So imagine when iron is first coming out. And we're going to get to Achilles at the end, I hope. Because Achilles, as we'll see, who is impervious except for a single spot, is a personification of meteor iron. But before we get there, and while we're focusing in this mythic version of the power shift, which is a topic which relates to an actual technological power shift, we see that Zeus, instead of Zeus being eaten, Kronos eats a swaddling stone. So Zeus is now in exile. He's raised by women, and he's suckled by a goat. And eventually he comes to Prometheus, and Prometheus becomes Zeus's mentor. Because in Zeus, Prometheus sees a new future. He sees a world order that can support his creativity, his brilliance, his thought, his egalitarianism, he even believes, and even change. So he's excited, and he's ready, and he's all in, and he becomes ready to go to war with his own brothers, and he becomes ready to confront the rest of the Titans. And so Zeus will go to get some help from the goddess, from a great matron. I believe it's Gaia. It's probably different in different versions of the story, but it's a matron figure. She gives him a poison. And the poison, which Zeus somehow tricks Kronos into swallowing, results in Kronos's vomiting. And so he vomits up all the Titans. And once the Titans are all vomited up, they all gather on Mount Olympus. And now we have the setup for what's called the Titanomachy. This is a 10-year war between the Olympians and the Titans. And what I want us to realize here is that this is really a war. I don't want to be reductive, but one of the ways we see this war is an internal war of the conscious mind trying to rise up against the instincts so that there can be a regulation of the whole self. And that requires the Olympians, which represent ways of thinking in many ways, and more refined ways of being, and conflict with a more primal id. And this is the same, or primal instincts. And this is really the same as the battle we see between, this is the bullfight, the conscious mind versus the animal, right? And as problematic as that is, this is a standard, this is in some ways the jihad, the inner war, the war inside yourself. And in this case, it's framed as consciousness versus the instincts, as the Titans versus the Olympians. And so what's going to happen, another thing I want to show you here that I think is pretty interesting, if I can just show you on my screen. So here, this image of Prometheus, this is one of the most famous. On the right, you see Prometheus bound to the sunrise, eaten by this eagle. On the left, you see Atlas. Atlas is at the sunset, holding up the world or the cosmos or whatever, however it's framed. But what you can realize is that what he's really holding up is the status quo. So Prometheus brings change. He is the sunrise, the new day, the new light, the new idea, the bringer of change. And what does the status quo want to do to change? Oppress it, repress it, no change, status quo, status quo, status quo. And so his brother, Prometheus's closest brother, Atlas, becomes the general of the Titan army. And so the Titans square off against the Olympians, Prometheus squares off against Atlas, and the sunrise squares off against the sunset, as you see here in this image. So this is the battle of the youth versus the old on one level too. The new way of seeing things versus the old way of seeing things. And Prometheus always represents the new way, and Atlas always represents the old way. So when you get to a myth like Atlas Shrugged, the idea there is that the Atlases are the ones that are holding up the world as it is. And if they don't, it's all going to fall apart. That's the structure. That's the concept with Atlas Shrugged. And it's the same concept you see here. So Atlas is resisting the change, leading the war. And so eventually, of course, the New World Order will win out and Zeus will defeat the Titans. And the victory of reason over the instincts will be achieved. And this is, Prometheus believes, the promise of a new way. However, it's not. What really happens when Zeus gets power is he wants more power. Zeus decides he's going to flood the world, tabula rasa. He's going to make the world in his image. Fuck the little guy. Fuck humans. Prometheus isn't okay with this. So during this time, he creates humans. He is the creator of humans, and he sees his humans as being destroyed by this flood. He sees the power that has created the new world ready to say, screw you to the little guy that helped him do it. Prometheus is not okay with that. He's never okay with that. He's not okay with that in 2020. And so what does he do? He tries to save the humans from the flood. He's the one who tells them hide in an ark. Hide in and this of course is connected to the flood myth, and one of the people who hide, the guy he hides, is named Deucalion, which is another word related to one of Noah's sons. It'll come to me right after we finish, but there's an etymological connection between these floods, suggesting diffusion, suggesting an actual awareness of these stories by those who are telling them. Either way, the point is, this is a flood. Zeus is flooding, wiping everything out, wiping out the little person, ready to make the new world. Prometheus saves them by telling them to get in an ark. And then when they get in an ark, or they get in a trunk, actually, as it's described, and the fact that it's a trunk, I could go into all kinds of tangents about how it really represents the coffin and the journey of the soul through the underworld, as you see when the coffin boat, like you see in the coffin boat of Osiris, right? But anyway, whatever. They hide out in a trunk, they hide out in a boat, they make it through, they survive the flood, and that was not Zeus's plan. So they show up at a feast that's designed for those who survive the flood. Little guy was not supposed to survive the flood. And when they come, dragging their asses up to that mountain, barely surviving, barely making it with the little bit of food that they have, Zeus thinks, all right, I'm going to make them sacrifice the little bit of food they have to me. Prometheus is thinking, if we do that, if we sacrifice the little bit of food we have, it's going to kill us. It's going to kill these humans. Forget that. So Prometheus makes a trick. The custom was to divide in halves and to offer a half. But he doesn't just cut in half. He doesn't just cut the ox in two. He divides it between its muscles, the meat, and then the bad stuff, the gross stuff. And on top of all the gross stuff, he puts fat, which is, as we know, the most delicious stuff. So he's trying to trick Zeus into falling for the fat instead of the meat. Zeus sees right through it. Because the thing is, by now, part of the reason why Zeus and Prometheus are losing favor with each other is that along the way, during the war, Zeus eats his wife, Metis. Metis wears the same word from Prometheus, metis, knowledge. So now Zeus has eaten knowledge. He's taken it into himself. He's got it himself. He doesn't need Prometheus anymore. He thinks he knows. He knows. He ate her. And then from his head, from that consumption, comes Athena, who will become Prometheus's closest ally. So, so what's happened here? All right. So now we've split the fire. Now Zeus is smart enough by now to see through Prometheus's trick. And he sees that he's going to be, but he actually decides, I would actually rather fake it. I would rather fall for the trick so that I have an excuse to punish this rebel. That's what he does. He pretends to fall for the trick. Then he gets angry, livid, accuses Prometheus of raping his daughter and all kinds of things. And in response, takes fire, technology, the power of the gods away from humans. Could you imagine if all of a sudden electricity, normal people were deprived of electricity and only the powerful people got electricity or internet or gasoline? Think of it that way. Fire, energy, knowledge, all of it, all that had been developed by a culture and civilization was now not allowed to go to the little person, to humans. Again, Prometheus is not okay with this. And this is what sets up Prometheus to, and by the way, well, whatever. This is what sets up Prometheus to steal the fire. And he does it with Athena's help. Athena's his buddy. And Athena and him he steals the fire. He keeps Athena clean. She doesn't get incriminated. But this is the ultimate symbolic expression. You know the phrase, power to the people. That's what he's doing. He's stealing fire from the gods and giving it to the people. In this way, in some ways, Robin Hood is a Prometheus. Zeus doesn't take this well. He's livid, he's furious, he's enraged. And so he does two things. And we're almost done with our story here. He does two things, both extreme new foundations in tyranny. First, he sets up the eternal objectification of women so that there's a consistent and systemic tyranny against women. So Pandora is made by a man, for a man, out of matter. She is a completely objectified woman. Athena is great. There are plenty of great women in this story. Pandora is designed to be an objectified woman. And meanwhile, and we're not going to get into Pandora tonight, it would be a whole other thing, a whole other day, but I wanted to say that much about her. Then the other thing, he sets up the eternal repression of rebellion. And this is represented by the chaining of Prometheus to the sunrise, which you also might see as the chaining down of the sunrise itself. That energy will not come from the below to change the world now. The volcano will not erupt. We will not cover the ground and make a new world. No, rebellion will be changed down. There will be no more change. There will be no more world order. But how useful are chains on a capstone? They really can't do it. A knee on a neck that can't oppress forever. Eventually there will be an eruption. So this is where many people stop the story. Prometheus bound. This is the establishment, you might say, of the human condition. Prometheus bound. Humans are mortals. Pandora is objectified. All kinds of chaos. Everybody has to labor. Women labor for children. Men labor for food. The world order is established. That is the new day that Zeus sets up. But it's not over. Something's going to happen. Adam and Eve aren't exiled either forever either. Neither is Prometheus. This is a motif with progenitors and first couples, first parents. They represent the establishment of the problem, just like any good opening sequence. And they set up the status quo, or the human condition, so that then the big change can come. The change it's always all about: liberation from power, discovery of wisdom over ignorance, and the consequent experience of union with lover, with divine, with cosmos. So Prometheus, the story of Adam and Eve, it's the setup. It sets up the problem. It sets up the status quo. It sets up the human condition, which is tyranny, which is the material world, and we can go on and on defining it. But the important part is that it's a setup, and we're going to arc. We're going to free the progenitors. Jesus is going to set Adam and Eve free. Hercules is going to set Prometheus free. So what is going on? What happens when we set him free? So first, let me tell you just the story of what happens when they're set free in the Greek version. So Zeus, by now, has matured into a more benevolent god. We don't always think of Zeus as a tyrant. That might be news to you when I explain that to you. Many of us might want to think of him as a Jehovah-like, divine, happy god. But just like Jehovah went from being much more angry in the Old Testament to being much nicer, so did Zeus. He starts out as a tyrant, and he goes through an arc as well. And he will become the god of justice. And by the time he finally becomes the god of justice, now when Hercules comes to set him free, to set Prometheus free, who is the son of Zeus, of course, just like Jesus is the son of God who will set the progenitor free. The son of God sets the progenitors free. So what happens is that Prometheus knew the prophecy. Prometheus knew what was going to be the downfall of Zeus. And he's been keeping it a secret, wanting Zeus to have this downfall. And when he ultimately releases the prophecy, what you find out is that if Zeus or Poseidon were to wed a certain woman, who is a woman from beneath the ocean, beneath the waves, like Guinevere, like so many wonderful, incredible mythic women that exist in the world beneath the waves. She does. And if either one of them were to marry her, then there would be destruction. They would both fall. However, Prometheus tells him, and instead she marries a mortal. The mortal, they have a child. That child is Achilles. And now we're back to the story of iron. Achilles, who is impervious except for a single weakness, connected all the way back to the beginning of the story with the swaddling stone that was spit out from the heavens onto the earth. What you find, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I'll quickly say that the very earliest iron was made from meteors. It came from the heavens, and it had a single weakness. And that single weakness is where you dipped it in water, where you quench the steel. It has that where you hold it is its weak point. So you recognize this when Achilles, where it's where it's more poeticized, dipped in the Styx, and we don't realize, yeah, he's impervious, has a single weakness, dipped in the Styx, all these pieces. And then if you look closely at the language, you see the words around his older armor and the word around his new armor. The new armor has words related to steel. So again, this story is a story of a power shift around the shift into the Iron Age. But that is only something I'm fascinated by, and really not the more interesting question here. And this is where I want to leave us and where I want to take us into conversation. If we're going to set Prometheus free, if we're going to set Adam and Eve free, what is it that sets them free? What is the trigger? What is that little moment? What is that symbol? What is the most important little thing that enables this liberation? What is the trigger of liberation? Let's look at them next to each other. Let's look at Prometheus, and let's look at Adam, and let's look at Eve, and see what is it that sets them free. In the case of Prometheus, in the case of Adam, it's the blood of Christ. If you go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is inhabited by all the Christian denominations except for the Protestants, it's a real kind of special thing. The Muslims actually keep it balanced and keep the keys and all these things so that the Christians can get along inside of here, the Catholics, the Eastern Orthodox, et cetera, et cetera. And this is in Palestine. And if you look, there is a place that says the blood of Christ trickled down and baptized Adam. This is where? Crack in the stone. Here's the crack in the stone where the blood was able to trickle down and baptize Adam. And this triggers Adam's release, his liberation and his restoration to divine union. It is the blood of Christ. Hold on to that for a second. So what is it that sets Prometheus free? It's the blood of a hydra. The special agent that makes it work is the blood on his arrow that enables him to kill the eagle that's eating the liver. So that special agent, that difference maker, is an elixir. But why elixirs? Why blood? What the hell is an elixir about? Is that just a symbolic, Holy Grail kind of elixir thing? Well, why would the Holy Grail have an elixir? Why would the symbol of the Grail, why would the symbol of union with the divine be an elixir? Well, now I'm going to take you to another place of deep headiness. So elixirs operate in a special way. Fluids operate in a special way. Cheers. Elixirs, fluids, waves, they carry waves. Fluids carry waves. and you can see waves in a fluid. Waves are very unique. So right now, if we were to all be in a room, all play a different musical instrument, we would all be making tons of notes and tons of sounds and tons of waves, sound waves, right? But if I put a single microphone, just this phone right here, if I just put one microphone in the middle of a whole symphony orchestra, it will record a single wave. And in that single wave will be represented all the many waves. So here you see the problem of one and manyness resolved. I showed a picture of Cornel West earlier, and this was a great excuse for me to find my autograph from him from the American Academy of Religion conference where I got to meet him. And his line, what he said to me was, take it to the streets. Academia, it's not on the streets. Get it on the streets. But he also said something about what I was saying about elixir. And what he said is that, look, manyness is great. Oneness is great. Inclusivity is great. But never let the individual be lost in the collective. And this is the importance of the paradigm represented by the symbol of the wave. The wave has no problem with one and manyness. Now, if I take a thing cannot be two places in one time. A, B, there is no oneness here. They cannot share space. Sound waves can do it. Elixirs can do it. Waves can be one and many. We don't live in a world where we think of things as waves. We think of things as things. We live in a world where we reduce things to atoms. And if you see everything is isolated into isolated everything isolated bits, how are you going to see yourself? Isolated. And if you see yourself as isolated, you're one step away from egoism. And with egoism, you're one step away from wanting power. You're one step away from hierarchy. So what you see is that the paradigm of things gives us a paradigm of isolation. And isolation sets up a perspective of power and a perspective of hierarchy. So what is the solution to that? An image, a metaphor, capable of sustaining one and manyness where they're not in conflict. And what gives us that image of one and manyness? Fluids, elixirs. And that is why I believe elixirs are elixirs as symbols. They're not just fluids. They're not just water. It's not just the life-giving nature of fluid. It's the metaphorical paradigm represented by waves. And so with that image, we can deal with one and manyness. And I think that's a big part of where we are. So we've gone a long distance. We've gone from the mountain image. We've gone, all over the place. Image, story, comparisons from the problem of tyranny to the solution of elixirs. We're now an hour in, and that is all that I have prepared. And I would like to now just hear anybody and everybody's thoughts about how this Promethean energy, how this conflict with tyranny, how this desire to create and respond to tyranny with creativity, anything that was triggered in this conversation. I hope you'll help me now bring it into the context that we're in 2020. Thank you.